you've got, you got that sand guy over there, and he sits in his little closet and doesn't tell you anything that's going on. And that's kind of actually where Brent came from. He was working for a company as a DBA, and then kind of towards the beginning of a lot of companies adopting SANs, and ultimately the SAN guy left and he became a SAN admin. So he's got a great wealth of knowledge of that. So 21st of next month, he'll be here, kind of the same deal. I don't know, we'll have Subway, we'll probably be back to pizza unless the .NET guys step it up. I'm going to turn it over to Samir because y'all have heard me talk enough tonight. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks, John. Good evening, everyone. Really today we'll go through the mission critical features of the next generation of SQL Server, which is SQL Server 2016. So over a year now, I guess Microsoft has been releasing their CTP versions, and it was off recently that they released the final release candidate 3, and it's there for downloading it. So for the purpose of this demo, I have release candidate 3 installed in my machine. So we will just go through all the features which will impact more from a developer or a DBA perspective. There are a lot of other features which will BI related, which I'm not covering as part of this session. So we'll just get started. So I'm Samir. I work as a .NET developer in EBSCO Industries. I have 10 years of experience in various domain, manufacturing, insurance, publishing. I've done a lot of .NET SQL work. So yeah, I've been part of this awesome group since the last 1 year. So I thought, okay, it's the time for learning something and contributing to the group. So that's where John pulled me in to speak this time. I have my own website, .netvibes.com. So all the content on this presentation, like all the details are out there on my website. So you can go there and get all the details. So what are we trying to cover in this session? We'll be looking at primarily 3 things: performance, productivity, and security features. From performance standpoint, query store, live query statistics. Productivity features, the big one, JSON support, temporal tables, comparing execution plans, and there are a bunch of T-SQL enhancements. We'll go through those. We have a lot of security features inbuilt into SQL Server 2016. Always encrypted, dynamic data masking. We also have row-level security, which I will not be covering, but I'll talk about it briefly. And for all these topics, I have a lot of demos, so we will go through those. The big announcement, Microsoft announced that they will be releasing SQL Server 2016 on June 1st. So, yep, I guess this is the right time for this presentation. Okay, so current state of a SQL developer. Now, this is something which I always think about when I look at SSMS at this point. If I compare Visual Studio, the features which a .NET developer has out of the box in Visual Studio, say from productivity standpoint or from a troubleshooting or a performance tuning standpoint, we have a lot of out of the box features in Visual Studio, and it has been growing with every version of Visual Studio release. With 2015, there are a lot of features there, but come SSMS, it still lacks all the necessary features. Say even for troubleshooting, there are not many stuffs out of the box. For security, nothing there. So most of the time, what we have to do is developers they have to write their own custom code to take care of all the different things, and or else we rely upon some third-party tools. But just looking at SSMS, not many things out of the box. So with SQL Server 2016, I think things are going to change. There are a lot of stuffs, at least for a developer, a DBA as well, and right from performance tuning, security. Yep. So we'll go through those. Okay, let's get started. First one, live query statistics. So how many times have we come across a scenario, say when we start, we have a query, we execute that query, and it just runs, and we don't get any results, but it just runs. We don't know what's happening behind the scene. It's a big query I have, and it joins 10 tables. I don't know if the indexing is correct, if I have joined it the right way. So something is wrong. Either the tables are too large. So how do I troubleshoot such a query? So I run it for a minute, for 2 minutes, and then I'll say, okay, I don't want to lock my database, so better I stop my query. So generally for troubleshooting any performance issue, we rely upon execution plans. So once I run a query, I get an execution plan, I look at it, okay, I have an index scan, I have a table scan, I have a lookup, so I can try to fine tune those from there. But what about a query which doesn't even return an execution plan, like it just runs, does nothing. So I guess that's where live query statistics comes into picture. Now, this is what live query statistics will show us. Now, when we fire a query against SQL Server, there are a lot of things which happens in the background. We have our relational engine, we have a storage engine. So relational engine takes care of most of the stuffs, like it will parse our query, it will generate our execution plan. It has the query optimizer, which will basically look at, okay, what are the indexes I can look for, how do I join the tables. So basically what the query optimizer does behind the scene is, it will try to figure out how many paths, say alternative paths are there to come to to get me the query results. And after evaluating all those alternatives, it will just pick out the plan which has the least cost. So that's what query optimizer does. And now just by looking at this, we can exactly see what's happening behind the scene. So this query is running. We see that, okay, the execution query, it is 37% at this point. So I always know how much my query has executed. Looking at it, this is a hash match, 99% done, 100% done, 73% done, 47, 99. There's a clustered index scan sitting at 13%. So 7% at this point. So as and when a query executes, I will be, just by looking at the stats, I will know which is my slowest operator out here. So no need of doing any analysis, no need of looking depending upon any tool, it's out of the box for you. So as and when the operation gets complete, the lines will go solid. The dotted lines say that, okay, I'm still running. So what are the benefits of live query statistics? Troubleshooting long-running queries, as I said, for any queries which doesn't give you any result set. So we can easily troubleshoot such queries. Real-time insight into SQL execution process. Whatever SQL engine is doing behind the scenes, obviously we have it up front, in front of us. What operators, what indexes are getting used, we know it just by looking at it. Visually track overall query progress. Many times, say, if I execute a query and I'm just waiting for it to complete, I have no idea how much time that query will take. It might take 1 minute, 2 minutes, but I never know. So now I will know exactly, okay, what's the query completion % time. How to enable live query statistics? At this point, we have two options with us. Like one is estimated execution plan, one is the actual execution plan. Just beside it, now we'll have a new button saying include live query statistics, and you can just click on that and run our query. We can get all the stats. And then using activity monitor as well. So generally to know what all processes are running in your SQL server, you generally go to your activity monitor and look at multiple stuffs. So you can look at the live query statistics from here as well. So you go and look at a quick demo. So I have AdventureWorks database here in my database, and this is a query I wrote. It's pretty tough. AdventureWorks database. So I had to write a query which will take more time. So I just put a cross apply there so that I can show it for the demo. So what I do is I will click on this button out here, execute, and you can right away see that the query has started running. What it will display is, as you can see here, 86 is the estimated number of rows, and it shows the actual number of rows as well. And what is the percentage completion? It is showing. So at this point, looking at all these different operators, I know that my pain point is this clustered index scan on product model, which is okay, just 7% done, and it's my slowest operator here. So pretty much out of the box. Then what we can do as well is we can go to any database. Say I'm running a query on AdventureWorks, so I can go to the. I have an option. Just trying to open up my. Oh, it's at the database level. Yep.
Instance.
Instance level. Run it over again.
All the way at the top.
Okay. There you go. So I have my active, my query running. I can click here, show live execution plan, and it will pop me up for whatever query which is running at that point. I can see those live query statistics even here. It's taking some time, but yeah, a couple of ways in which we can look at the live query statistics. We will move on to the next feature, Query Store. Now this is I guess one of my favorite features in 2016. So I have a couple of scenarios listed, like say you come across a temporary performance issue. You have not done any releases of late, but still you come a fine day and users will start saying that okay, the application is behaving slow. You start looking at your database and you figure out okay, the queries are running a bit slow, but you never know, you have made no changes to your database. So at that point, it becomes very important for you to know, to get a history of how your query is executed. Okay, can I get an execution plan of my query from yesterday, and I can generate an execution plan today and then just compare it. That will give me the correct picture as to what has changed behind the scenes. So at this point, there is no way in which SQL Server actually maintains any history. To get any, say, if I want to know the top 25 slow running queries in my application, the only way for me at this point is through a DMV. So what I can do is, okay, I can write a big DMV, take it from internet somewhere and fire it up, and it will say me, okay, these are the top 25 slow running queries which you have. But the problem with DMV, once you restart your server, once you do an upgrade, anything, so all the information which is stored on a DMV gets deleted. So you don't have that history for a long period of time. That's where Query Store comes into picture. What it does is basically it captures a history of all the queries, of all the stats which you are running across your SQL Server, and it stores it basically on the disk itself. So you never lose track of your history. And other cool feature is there are 4 new UI reports now. Say till this point of time, there is no centralized place in SQL Server Management Studio where you can actually say, okay, there are no reports which it displays out of the box. So with Query Store, it now displays us 4 type of reports. It will tell me upfront saying that okay, these are the top 25 slow running queries. These are the 10 queries which has degraded over a period of last 6 months. So all those stats are available to a developer or a DBA. Everyone has access to it right up front. So it's directly integrated into SQL Server. So all of us have it. There is no need of depending upon any DMVs. Generally, I don't have access to even run DMVs in a say QA or even in a mock environment. I have to go to John, say, okay, run this query. So, yeah, all this stuff now we have out of the box for a developer. No need for depending upon any third party. Graphical user interface is built into SSMS now. So, what does Query Store do? First thing, it stores the history of execution plan and statistics of each query, right? As I said, in the SQL Server database itself. So you always maintain that history. Secondly, baseline performance metrics and track deviations. What you can do with Query Store is say, since you have a history of how your queries are running, you can say that you can baseline the performance. Say you have a big query, say on your loading page, the main query which you have, which generates all your populates the main grade. What you can do is you can baseline it, saying looking at the last 4 months, my timing for this query is say 0.4 millisecond. And once you baseline it, anytime it degrades, that query will come in your report. So there are a lot of configurations which you can do. Display customizable UI reports. As I said, we have 4 different new type of reports, and there are a lot of configurations which we can do. I will show in the demo. And finally, diagnosing performance issues after upgrades as well. So you do an upgrade, move your SQL Server from instance from 2008 to 2012, all of a sudden your performance degrades. What has happened behind the scene? So at that point, what you can do as well, one of the cool features with Query Store, say you look at one of the query which has run over a period of 6 months, it's taking just 0.4 millisecond. You have an execution plan for that store. You have your new query running which takes 4 seconds. So you can compare the execution plan, and you can even tell SQL Server that okay, when you execute, when you run this query, don't take in this execution plan, go and take the optimized execution plan. So you can force SQL Server now from this UI to take up to run any execution plan for a particular query. How does Query Store work? So basically, when you fire a SQL, that's Query Store. It has 2 main stores. One is the plan store and one is the runtime stats store. So the plan store captures all the execution plans for any query you execute against your SQL Server. Runtime stats, so how much time it took, CPU wise, IO, all those stuff will be captured in this runtime stats store. And all this information at a particular duration, it will be stored inside your database itself. So Microsoft by default, they have put that interval as 15 minutes for the plan store, 5 minutes for the runtime statistics. If you want to decrease that time, you can do that. You can configure it in any way. But whatever they have said is, if you decrease the timing, you might see a bit of performance hit there, because we are storing every 5 minutes onto your disk. So the optimal configurations are 15 minutes and 5 minutes for this. Already talked about it. DMVs, Query Store. So DMVs gets cleared out after every whenever you restart your SQL Server, after every upgrade, or whenever you do a recompile event. So with Query Store, all the information is always stored on your disk. What are the different type of reports? First one, regressed queries, which shows basically all the queries which have degraded over a period of 6 months. Say you say that okay, it calculates a baseline timing for each of these query which is getting executed, and if it sees that okay, performance of any query drops down, it will pop up that query inside this report. So that takes care of your monitoring event. So that's a good one. Overall resource consumption basically shows the stats for the runtime stats, how much time each of your query takes. So you can sort it with CPU time, execution time, lot of stuffs. Top resource consuming queries. So I think as a developer, you always should be knowing actually what are your top 10 slowest query. Say if I do a development and say I write a query, I write it perfectly. I generate the execution plans, I do a covering index, the query is totally optimized, and I say, okay, this is the best query I can have. I deploy it to prod. After a period of 6 months, the table has grown in size. There are multiple new columns added. So there is a chance that that same query could degrade. So how do you know that? So generally, how do we keep track of it? I will look at this query after 6 months. I am the developer. I will say, okay, this query is the best query I've written. So I won't even doubt that guy. So all those stuffs we can now see in this report. What are my top resource consuming queries? Duration wise, CPU time, logical reads, memory consumption. We can arrange, sort it, everything. We can take reports directly. It can you can generate reports graphically, all different types, whatever you want. And then track queries. What you can do with the track query is, if you want to just pick out one of your pain point queries, so you can pick that out. You can take that ID and you can put it into this report, and basically it will give you the entire history of that particular query. So how do you enable and configure query store? By default, it is turned off. It's a database level configuration. DMDs are server level. So query store is a database level configuration, and once you enable it under your database itself, you will see a new folder, query store, and you will have the different type of reports there. You can double click and look at any of these. Very important to know what are the different configurations. As you can see, the first one, operation mode, that's what I said, it's turned off by default, but if you want to turn it on, you have to do it as a read-write. Data flush interval is 15 minutes by default, which I said that, okay, execution plans are getting stored into my database every 15 minutes. You can change it whatever you need. Statistics collection interval, 5 minutes. Max size, you can configure your the size of your query store, say 1024 MB, and once it reaches that 1024 MB, the operation mode will change by itself automatically from a read-write to a read. So you will be able to read, but no information gets stored into your query store. Then you have options to clean up. So you can, if you want to clean up every 30 days your query store, you can do that. What all type of queries you want to capture, so there you have that capture mode there. Again, how does all this query store work behind the scene? Nothing new. We have a bunch of new DMVs behind the scenes now. There are 7 new DMVs which are now included in SQL Server 2016, which captures all this information and displays in the UI reports. Let's look at a quick demo. So, I have visible. Enlarge it. So I have query store enabled here in my AdventureWorks database, and you can see that under query store folder I have these 4 type of options. Say one of my database, say this one, I don't have query store enabled. So what I can do is I can right click, go to properties, I will get this, and here on the query store, you see that it is turned off by default. What you can do is you can make it read-write. So these are the default configurations, and I guess we'll click on OK. So once we do that, just refresh it, and here goes my query store, and I will see all the reports, and it will start capturing all my data. So I have been running few queries lately, so so this is the type of report which it will be displaying for the request query. So, and I have a lot of options here: duration, logical reads, logical write. I can sort it any way. I can look at my execution plan here, and these are basically the execution plan and how much time it has taken. So if I see that in this graph that any of my queries taking more time, and I want SQL to consider this execution plan. So I have a option as force plan, unforced plan. So I had forced the plan. So say if I want to force any execution plan, so I can click on here and I can force SQL to now go ahead and take into consideration the plan which takes the minimal time. So we have all the stuffs out here, different views we can get. So these are the queries. You can get a grid view, any type of views which you want. So same thing with all these different type of reports, resource consuming queries. I can double click and it will basically take me to the details. Same thing here with top resource consuming queries. I can look at here, okay, what are the top resource consuming queries. I can pick up my execution plan. In this track queries, I can give any ID of the query and I can track it. And behind the scenes, as I said, if I look at views, under system views, I drag down sys.query. So these are the new 7 DMVs which are present in SQL Server 2016. We will move on to the next.
I have a question. So the regress query, that's interesting to me, but can you set a point in time, like compare it to 3 months ago? That kind of thing where, like, say you're in an agile project or something, and
Yeah.
the last time you went through testing or whatever was like a month
So-
ago or something like that, and compare.
So whatever I have seen, it at this point, so it has been. I have this version since last 1 month. So it has been capturing the entire history, and this report shows me for that, but the entire 1 month period. I think there will be a way to configure that as well. I've not done that because I don't have that history, but I think there should be a way to even look for the last 3 months. Because what you can do is the query store you can flush if you want to just store the history for the last 3 months. You can have your query store configured to capture only last 90 days data. So that way, every time you will just have your last 90 days data, and you'll have your all your regressed queries for that time period. So I guess that's the way where how you configure it.
Yeah, it's looking like it's built off extended events, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
How that works.
Yeah.
So it's got basically an extended event trace running in the background,
Yeah.
capturing those
Yeah.
execution plans. And
So there's all these DMVs have magic behind the scenes. Couple of important points I already said. Performance impact, just to keep in mind, data plus interval. If we change those, minimize those timing, we'll see a bit of hit on the performance. Max size, obviously it gets stored in your SQL database, so you can configure it, but it's one thing which you need to always keep in mind. Okay, what's the max size? You don't want it to just go for a GB or something, so you can configure it for your size. Comparing execution plans, this is a simple feature, but SQL Server did not have it. Say I have a couple of environments, dev and a QA. The same query has different, in QA it runs slow. What do I do? Now with a dev and QA, there can be a lot of differences. My table size might differ, there might be some indexes missing, I don't know. A lot of factors to different environments. On that thing, what we generally do is we will generate execution plans for both the environments, and then we can just take a look and compare and see, okay, what's making my QA environment to go slow. However, if I have a big query which say joins 10 tables, and the execution plan is huge, so that comparing two execution plans to big execution plans manually is always a pain. And think about, say, I have a big query and it's not performing well, and you start fine-tuning the query, and you identify that, okay, there are a couple of indexes which I need to create. go ahead and create those, and then you run the query again, generate an execution plan, and now you want to showcase that, okay, what's the performance benefit I got by creating those two indexes. Now you have to manually look at, okay, what are the differences. So SQL Server 2016 now gives it out of the box, a compare utility, where you can compare execution plans, and it will exactly highlight you the operators which have changed or which haven't changed. So you can configure those. How do you compare it? You have a new feature, compare so plan feature out here, and you can see I have a small execution plan, but it now highlights in purple the operator which has not changed. I can as well do the opposite. I can say, okay, highlight the one which has changed. So out of the box it will give us this comparison thing.
Can this compare across the development to production?
It can do that. So
Straight up.
you need to have both of your execution plan saved, and then you can do a compare. So that's the only thing. It's an offline compare. So
It's okay.
yeah, so you just have your execution plan and compare. And it's not just about those color things, but in the properties window, you have a dual property window now, wherein you can click on any of the operator, and it will basically show you the difference. The basic things which we actually look at in the properties is what are my actual number of rows, what is the estimated operator cost, or the number of rows read. So you'll be able to see difference between a particular clustered index scan and index seek, and probably sometimes for reporting purpose as well, I can show that, okay, so this is what has changed, how I improved my query. Same thing, if you want to actually look at a global level, say I don't want to compare any operator, but I want to compare the overall query timing, say what it was taking earlier and after my performance improvement, what it's taking now. So you can actually click on this select, say out here, you can just click on this select button, select operator, and then it gives you this global properties which will show you, okay, what's the compile time, what's the cost of the query, and if there are any missing indexes, SQL sometimes they are offset up too. So I will quickly show you demo. So I have this query. Let me turn on my execution plan. So if you can see, upfront tells that, okay, I have an index scan operation, and there is a missing index. So what I do is, okay, I go ahead and create a non-clustered index, which SQL told me upfront, and then I go and run the query again. So I see that my index scan has now converted into an index seek. So what I can do is, I can click on compare show plan. So this is my, I have already saved the earlier execution plan, and this is what it's displaying. So it's highlighting in pink color here. It says highlight similar operations. So if I uncheck this and click this button, so it will highlight the operators which are not matching. So index seek changed, the index scan changed it to index seek, so it now displays color wise. I can toggle it as well. If I want to look at it side by side, I can click on it, click on properties, and I can get my dual properties window. If I click on the select, again do a properties, I will be looking at again this dual properties at an overall level. So that's how execution plans work. We are running out of time. Stuff to show. So the next feature, which is very important from a developer perspective, built-in JSON support. Obviously, a lot of web APIs these days are now using JSON as their data interchange format. Gone are the XML days. JSON, since it is lightweight, it has a bunch of advantages over XML, so it's widely used these days. And primarily because JSON actually stores the data in an array format, which is pretty much similar to an object-oriented language. So it gets pretty much, like XML, it doesn't need to be transformed, so it can be out of the box used by JavaScript as well. So bunch of advantages of JSON over XML: it is lighter, it is faster, it's easily readable. The most important thing now, SQL Server has 2016 is now supporting JSON. So it doesn't like XML. It doesn't have a new data type, a JSON data type, but all the JSON data will be stored as nvarchar data type itself. So there are two things now. You have the client application, you have the SQL Server. So you want to store any JSON object in your SQL Server, and then you should be able to manipulate, do your operation, and then pass back a JSON object to your client. So how do you do that? So for that purpose, we have two important syntax for JSON. Say I have a basic query: select star from employee when employee ID is greater than 10. And if I want to convert it into a JSON object, I just append for JSON at the end, and it will create a JSON object basically. So there are two things here for JSON auto and for JSON path. JSON auto, it's pretty much if whatever columns you have in the select clause, it will create the JSON object as per that. With JSON path, you have more control. If you want to modify your JSON object, format it in any way, you can use that. And then once say this was about how whatever data is there in your SQL Server, I converted as JSON object, sent it to the client. Now what about a client sending in some JSON object? So, and how do you store it into your database? So basically you will need to transform your JSON object into SQL tables. So you can do it through this open JSON function. So it will take in your JSON object, convert it into a table. JSON functions basically to handle any type of operations, any type of manipulations, whatever you want to do with your JSON objects. There are four basic syntax, new functions which are there. Is JSON, it verifies that the text has valid JSON data. Say you receive a JSON object from your client side. So before saving it to your SQL Server, you obviously need to validate if it's a valid JSON object or not. So you use your isJSON function and you do that verification. JSON query, if you want to extract any particular object from your JSON data, say select top 100 from your employee table, and you want to just look at what is the 50th employee, properties of the 50th employee, use JSON query. JSON value, again, if you want to look at specific data, say 50th employee, I want to look at the SSN information. So use JSON value, extract that value from there. JSON modify, you will be able to add, update, delete any type of data manipulations you can do with JSON modify. Quickly on isJSON, again, if it's a valid JSON, it returns 1. If it's not a valid, it returns a 0. JSON value, there are two modes, lax mode and strict mode here. Say if there is any error with your JSON object and you want to send an error back to your client, so you have to mention strict mode. By default, SQL Server has a lax mode, and as part of that, it will not throw an explicit error, it will just give you a null value. JSON query, again, the same thing, it just pulls in an object. JSON modify. JSON, I have demos for it, but I will keep it for the last since we are running out of time. Temporal tables. this is a big thing. So this is, think about your database at this point. You are continuously making changes to your database. So what happens to all the old versions of your table, say for auditing purpose or for any trend analysis? Sometimes you actually need to keep track of what the data you are modifying. So temporal tables is a new feature in 2016 which will give you out of the box. It will keep on, you try to go ahead and update any table. What it will do is the old version of that data gets moved into a new history table. So SQL Server now has a new type of system version user table. So what will happen is you have your base table, and within the base table you will have an exactly mirrored schema table which will be your archive table, and any modifications which you do to your table, it goes and gets captured into your archive tables. So there is no need of any additional programming. There is no need of putting triggers on your main table which you want to capture. You do it all the time. We have some additional programming done even to capture all the modified data. Nothing out of the box, we have this feature. So why is temporal required? First, time travel. It gives us the ability to go back, say I am sitting on May 17th today and I want to take a look at how my database looked like on March 1st. I can just go and query my employee table, say that select staff from employee table where as of date is equal to March 1st. It will give you the exact version of how your data was on March 1st. So at any point of time, you can always have the option of going back, traveling back in time and seeing what your database looked like. Simplified data audits. Obviously, if you have any audits, if there are any regulatory compliance things which you have, so they will need to see, okay, what data changed, who changed, when it has changed. So now with all your modifications captured into your history table, you have all your auditors happy. Trend analysis. Business will always want to do a trend analysis. Say they want to look at how much revenue they generated in 2010 compared to 2016. So with temporal table, you can go back to any point of time. So you will always have that option of doing any sort of reporting trend analysis as well. And then this is good. Repair corruption. Say I go ahead, run a query in my production at 10 o'clock and I was trying to update 5 records and by mistake I have updated 5,000 records. What do I do? So generally now we try to get a backup of my database, look at how it was 20 minutes ago, do some lot of work around it. But with temporal, we can just fire a query, say that okay, 10 o'clock you ran this query, give me the state of the database as of 9:59 and it will give you the exact state. So you can just take those rows, insert it back. So it's pretty much out of the box, perfect. So this is how it actually looks like. You have your temporal table, which is the base table. This is the history table. You have the user. So if you are trying to insert any record, it goes in, gets stored in your temporal table. But if you try to do any data manipulation operation, what it happens is it goes, updates your main table, and then the old version gets moved to your history table. So that's how it will work. Now if a user wants to get any old data, they didn't query the history table. They have to always query the main table, and SQL will be intelligent enough to figure out when it needs to pull information from the history tables. And how do you actually access history data? With temporal, there are 4 temporal extensions. One is point in time. You can say, okay, I need my information as of 10th March, 10 a.m. So I can do that. You have exclusive boundaries. From date to date, you have inclusive lower and exclusive upper bound. Between this date and this date, inclusive bound contained in this start time, end time. So pretty much you have all the scenarios covered up. Quickly see this thing in demo. This will be fun. at temporal. If you see it, this is a new syntax event, drop table if exist, DBO employee. Generally, all this while we have to look at if you want to drop any table, okay, select count star from this and if blah blah blah. So no need of doing that, we can right away drop the tables. The syntax is a bit different for temporal, which I want to show you here. This is basically the syntax. If you want to create a new table, you will need, along with your columns, you need to specify 2 new date time columns, which will be like valid from till and valid to. So valid to will be the end of date time, but valid from is okay, what is the current time. So that's how SQL Server will capture, will know exactly what are the changes.
Versions of it.
What, yeah, that's how it will do. And you have to mention it as, okay, system versioning on is, and if you want to convert your existing tables to your temporal table, again you can do it by adding just these 2 columns. Say I create my temporal table. Again, if you want to drop your temporal tables, say the one which I created just now, I'll show you. Refresh this guy. Look at here. We have the system version table, and below it SQL Server has created a temporal history and with a random number because I did not provide it any name. But if you look at the columns, it's mirrored schema. So basically it's the same columns which we have for the base table and for the history table, same bunch of it.
You can enlarge it.
Yeah, I can show it too. So I don't like this tool, but yeah, somehow it works. Okay, this is the system version table which has these columns. Again, temporal history table contains exactly the same schema. There are no triggers, nothing. I don't know how it works behind the scene, but it works great. So what I can do is, if I want, this is not a good naming for a temporal for a history table. So if I want to name it my way, I need to specify it. So how do I alter a temporal table? So I have to turn the system versioning off and then run it. So it's done. And then if I want to rename my temporal table, I can mention it under here, system versioning on, history table is DBO employee history. So it will go ahead and create with the same name. Now if I look at here, refresh this guy and open up. Let's see, I'll refresh it again. Employee, I did not delete it. Oh. So I will just not copy it properly. This. Oh, it's in the test database, actually, yeah, that's correct. Catch. So here if I
Just delete this.
conversion, I don't see employee history.
You just deleted it.
I just deleted it. Okay, yeah, that's a good. Okay, now I'll create it. So I'll refresh that and tables should be in now. Yep, employee history is what I have. So what we'll try to do is we'll just try to insert into this employee table. We will look at employee and employee history. Obviously there is nothing inside the history table. It's blank at this point. What we'll try to do is we'll delete the third employee Robert from here, not this Robert, but just a random name, and then update the second record to the age from 40 to 38. We'll do that. And now let's look at the employee and employee history. So as we see, so the employee table has now just 2 rows. I deleted the third one. The second row has age 38, and the employee history has the third row and the updated second row with age 40, and it has the timings here. So just looking at the timing, obviously we did it immediately now, but we can capture this guy. Say there's a millisecond difference between this 43, 49, or these are UTC timings. So 1643 till 1710. So what I can do, say if I want to look at my employee table at before this deletion happened, modification happened, I can do that. I can just say make a small change, so go back by 1 millisecond and run this guy, and here it goes. So basically we are looking at, this is the current employee table which has 2 records, and it is the same employee table for system time as of 1 millisecond before, and I got the exact state of the database as it was. Again, if you want to do any sort for any employee ID, you can do that. You have all the options available. We will jump on to the next topic. We are running really short of time.
How many more you got?
I have another 4 features to go, so which I will try to complete. I will just run through those more demos.
I don't know, you're losing your wife here.
She isn't going anywhere. Yeah.
You probably get that all the time.
Yeah. So the next feature is stretch database. Say business always accumulates a lot of data over a period of time, whether it is on their say employee system or any database. So most of the time what happens is like any of your archive data is always, it remains cold. Say you have your big employee database, so any data which is older than 3 years, you hardly access it. So, but what do you do about it? Generally, if you want to move it to a different database, that's what you do, because you want to keep your main tables short enough so that your performance is not hit. So you will truncate, keep on truncating that table or moving the data every 1 year, 2 years. But once you do that, your data actually goes offline from your client application. Since your history data is in a different server location, you won't be able to actually access that data. So, and there's a lot of maintenance activities as well. You have to truncate, you have to maintain it all the time. If you want to access that old data, you have to go to that other server. So with stretch database, SQL Server now allows you to extend your on-premise database and move it to Azure, that is the cloud. And obviously cloud, Azure is a lot cheaper. So it is fast, it is cheaper. All your data now is always online. So you can easily say that, configure it, say that okay, any data which is more than 1 year, move it to my archive, say in the cloud. So it takes care of all those transition. You can apply any security techniques, they are always encrypted and your data is always secure. What you get out of it? Obviously cost effective, because Azure is far more cheaper. They say that it is 70% more cheaper. I don't have the cost, but that's what they say. No changes are required to your application. You don't need to do any changes. Everything is automated. You just configure it saying move my old data, like archive my data after a period of 365 days, 700 days. It happens by itself. Reduces on-premise maintenance, all the maintenance activities a developer does, a DBA does, you keep on moving to a new store, all those stuffs, everything is gone. Keep data secure during migration. You can use any of the encryption technologies or any of the security like always encrypted, row level, all those stuffs, and you can keep your data safe.
There's one limitation. I don't remember what it is.
Which one?
I don't remember. I remember I went to an Azure class last month. They had one limitation on
On
the encryption time for Azure.
there are a lot of limitations actually. So on always encryption, there are some drawbacks. Again, on dynamic, there are different security policies. Dynamic data masking, again, that has a bunch of advantages, disadvantages. We'll just discuss about it in my upcoming slides. So this is how the stretch database architecture will look like. You have your client application, on-premise SQL Server instance. You have your database, Azure databases in the cloud. You have a secure channel. If you want to store any data, basically, you store it in your SQL Server. And once it is, say, old, say 365 or any particular time frame, it goes and gets stored in your Azure database as and when, but still those data is always online. If you want to pull anything from your client DB, client application, you just query your on-premise database, it will get you all the information as however it needs. Bunch of T-SQL new enhancements.
So it's just a question, like
Yep.
the query plan and some of those other things, you know, the performance tuning, does it show that it's actually going to Azure to pull it?
No, you won't know that it is getting, so it will be like it's an extension to your existing table. So behind the scene, you will not know it. So it will be available, you won't see any performance lag. You will never know that, okay, your database, you have another storage back in Azure. It will be right instantaneously fast. Execution plan as well, nothing. I showed it, drop if exist, a new syntax. You don't need to, it's applicable for database table function stored procs. You don't need to look at whether your table exists, whether your function stored proc exists before dropping it. So you write drop table if exists db employee, works right away. Date diff the underscore big function, date diff function was already there. I think this is just an extension to that, because date diff used to return a arithmetic overflow exception if it goes beyond the integer range. So this one returns a big int, so that problem is taken care. String.split, this is my favorite function. Yep, all the time we were in a pain, okay, if you want to do any operation with a string, how do we break it down by a delimiter? Yep, it has, out of the box you put your string, say SQL Server rocks, and it will return you in a table structure, say SQL Server rocks. So you have it inbuilt now. No need of using any different functions or writing any custom code. Again, compress, decompress. Most of the times, since SQL Server is not having any compression thing, I guess we always used to use some algorithm in the client side, save it to the database. Now it has the same algorithm built into SQL Server. You can use your, say, select if you want to, you have a big description or something, compress this, store it. Again, decompress, take it out. So, helps a lot. I have a demo, but I will skip this for now. Move to two new security features. Always encrypted. It's basically a new database encryption technology. It's primarily client side. Now it's totally different from encryption from how we used to do all this while. It's a client side encryption. So even if you are the DBA like John, you won't be able to see any sensitive information. So that was one of the major concerns for any audits. Okay, your DBA might be having access to your sensitive information, and say what happens if somebody tampers with my database, even if your database gets lost, what happens in that case? So always encryption is the answer. It's a totally client-side encryption. You have a concept of, there are a couple of keys, column encryption keys and a master key. The master key is stored on the client side. So at SQL Server side, you will never have access to decrypt any of the data. You can never see any plain text data. So behind the scenes, all the data is transformed, it is changed, modified, encrypted and stored into your database. So that's how it works. Total end-to-end encryption. as I said, column encryption key, column master key, column encryption key. Say I have two columns in my employee table, SSN and credit card information. I want to secure those two columns itself. So I can create a column encryption key on those two columns, store it in SQL Server, but I cannot look at the data without a column master key, which is sitting on top of that, and that key gets stored on the client side. So sitting in SQL Server, even if you have the entire DB access, you won't be able to access any sensitive information. Again, how it works, this is how the architecture will look like. I put it diagrammatically. So this is the client side, this is the DB database. You have a table, name, SSN and country. From the client side, I fire a query, select name from employee where SSN is equal to this. You have the ADO.NET driver in the client side, which will actually take care of all the encryption here. So what it will do is ADO.NET driver, it will transform this query, say it will encrypt your SSN information and put it, okay, select name from employee where SSN is this, and that number is what is stored out here. SQL Server will return that name. This is the name. Again, it sends to the ADO.NET driver. It decrypts the information. I get Samir Behra here. So it's total encryption, decryption at the client side, and everything is done with the ADO.NET driver. Even if you lose your database, somebody tampers, nothing, you will never be able to access any sensitive information. So why is all this encryption required? Obviously, additional security for your sensitive data in flight, prevent database users from having access to sensitive data. This is now the major concern coming out from any data objects which you do. Everything is fine, but okay, some of your DBAs, they do have access. We don't want anyone having access to SSN or credit card information. Running database in the cloud, you can use that. Regulatory compliance, data audits, they are happy. The last feature I have for today, right on time, dynamic data masking. Now, what is this and how is it different from always encrypted? It's pretty much on the same line, but this is, always encryption is end-to-end technology, and dynamic data masking is just say, I want to still secure my SSN and credit card information, but I don't want to decrypt, like change all the information in the background. I can store the information as is on my SQL Server, but I don't want, say I want John to have access, but all other in this room, I don't want them to see all this SSN and any of the sensitive information. So that's what we want. There are a particular set of users who we don't want to access those sensitive information. That's what we can do with dynamic data masking. We can configure users who can access particular sensitive information. Data is masked on the fly. No data changes in the background, but you won't be able to see any sensitive information. Very simple to enable it. It's not a replacement for encryption, but it works very good. How does it work? It has 4 masking functions basically. It's very important. Default, if you say, okay, anything on SSN field, mark it as default. So whatever is the content, it will just XXXX. It will just mask the entire thing. Email, anything with an email ID, say samirbehra@gmail.com, it will just say Samir, it will just do sxxx.xxx.com. Partial, say I have a phone number 860-634-1705. I want to just show the first digit, last digit, X out everything else. I can use the partial function. Random function, it just works on numeric types, but say I don't want to display the age of my employees, and I just want to give a random age, say between 100 to 200, pick up any random number and display. So SQL Server will do that now. How does it work behind the scene? This is what I could think of from an architecture standpoint. This is a client side, this is the database. You have a security officer or an admin, you can say, who can define your data masking policy, say which fields are your sensitive information, say SSN, credit card information, how you want to mask it. He can configure those, and the admin here, he sees first name, last name, age, phone number, email, SSN, all these are as is information, but all the other users, as you see here, XXX in last name, age, phone number as well is masked, email, SSN, so all those are masked, so you can configure those. Quickly, the last demo, I'll show how it works real time. This will be quick. Just past 2 minutes. So we will drop if the table exists. So what I have done here is all the 4 different type of masking functions which I have. Say for last name I have said okay default, so it will X out everything on the last name. Age I have said random between 80 to 90, so that field is masked. It will show a random number from 80 to 90. Phone number, show me the first 2 digits, X out everything, show me the last 3 digits. Email, use the email functionality. SSN, show me the first digit, X out everything, show me the last 2 digits. Credit card name, information, X out everything. So, did I create this table? I forgot. Let's see. So, there is no customer table. I'll go ahead and create it. I'll insert some random data into it. Let's view this table now. As you see, all are unencrypted data, if you are not able to see it, but all are unencrypted data. So that's good. What we want now, what we can do is, I will create a new test user and I will just configure it and give it select access on this customer table, and I will execute the next query as a test user. So let's do that. Now look at my customer. I will X out. Now you see that the test user who has just select access, he sees all the masked data. So that's the difference as to how you can, very easy to configure whoever you need to, you don't want to show the sensitive data, you can configure it. And there is a new DMV, masked columns. If you execute that, it will show you all the masked fields which are there inside your database. That's it from dynamic data masking. There is one more new feature which is row level security, which is in 2016 as well, wherein you will be able to say on a particular table, if I want you to just look at first 2 rows, you to look at the middle 100 rows, so I will be able to even configure at that particular level. So on a particular table, I can say user 1 has access to the first 100 rows, user 2 has access to the next 100 rows. So all those stuffs are in there. For more information, I have actually stored all the SQL queries which I have used for the purpose of this demo inside my GitHub account. I'll share it with all of you. I've created GIST for all of these. And then in my website, .NETVibes.com, you have all the details about each of these topics which I talked about. So I guess the floor is all open for any questions you have.
So JSON functions look a lot like the XML functions. Do they also use like if tags to
Absolutely.
as the expression?
So I talked about for JSON auto. For JSON path, you can actually, like you do with XML, you can set up the root element. I was not able to show you the demo, but I have it. If you want to see, I can show you.
No,
Yeah. So you'll be able to do the same things.
It's the same thing with like the JSON underscore value where you're pulling the value.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's pretty much similar to what XML is. They do not want to
No, it's
put
good.
any differences.
That's the best way to
Yeah. Just that you don't have a dedicated JSON data type here, because I guess
So you just start as the in varchar.
and varchar, because already lot of applications they are already storing JSON objects into the database as of even today in the SQL Server 2012 database as well. and they are storing it as plain text as an endorser. So they did not want to break that functionality, so okay, you will still be able to use it, they said.